Head on Fire is a Patreon-supported podcast. Supporters of the show get early access to ad-free episodes, a private Discord server, archives, and more. All benefits are offered on a sliding scale, so no matter your level of donation, you never miss out. If you like this show, consider supporting it with $1 a month or whatever you can at patreon.com/headonfirepod. Thanks, and enjoy the show. One of the cool things that the internet lets us do is come together to share common interests, especially when those common interests aren't so common. If you really love a particular TV show, but it's a little bit niche, you can go online to find a community of people that also love that really cool niche TV show that maybe not a lot of people in your daily life know about or love, but suddenly you're able to kind of engage with a bunch of other people that all love a thing you love. You could also do this with musicians, certain celebrities, characters from some of these shows. The internet's ability to allow us to create our own communities, our own subcultures with their own hierarchies, their own community structures, sometimes their own language, is a thing that's kind of unique, that's come up in the last couple of decades as the internet has risen to prominence. But it doesn't come without its downfalls. We've all seen the headlines where a particular pop star's fans go a little bit too overboard, and that is putting it gently, whenever they see a review about that pop star's most recent album that would, by any other standard, be considered a pretty great review, but wasn't glowing, wasn't a 100 out of 10. And so, these fans have been known to go after not only the reviewer, but sometimes the reviewer's job, the reviewer's livelihood, and at times even the reviewer's family, the reviewer's kids, dredging up personal details, sharing them on the internet, doxing them, going after their life and livelihood. And when casual fandom turns into extreme fandom, it can be pretty concerning. It can be actually dangerous, not just dangerous online, not just dangerous to your mental health, but actually dangerous to your real life physical safety. And so a lot of people aren't willing to talk about it. In fact, if you watch the YouTube version of this interview, you'll notice that my guest today, Sam Aburime, who is an illustrator and a researcher of pop culture and extreme fandoms, chose to redact their face because of safety concerns. And I'm very glad that we did that, because the more that you study this extreme fandom culture, the more terrifying it can seem. So this is a deep dive, an introduction into some of the concepts surrounding extreme fandom, how extreme fandoms operate, what it is that we can maybe learn from extreme fandoms, and some of the warning signs that maybe your own love of a piece of culture might be going too far. There will be resources in the notes of this show for further reading and good quality research if this is a topic that interests you. Sam Aburime, welcome to Head on Fire. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So this is a difficult topic. It's a touchy topic, but it's one that I know a lot of people are starting to kind of take notice of in recent years. I don't know if we're taking notice of it because we've all gotten so online since the pandemic, or if we've just noticed it because there have been some higher profile incidences. But you are here today to talk about, I like your phrasing of it, extreme fandom. So for people that don't know about this subject or yourself, tell folks a little bit about you and the work that you do studying this phenomenon.
Yeah. So I actually started looking into this stuff about almost 4-ish years ago now. I saw it, from a healthy distance for several years, pretty much. It was one of those things that always seemed on the niche, the end of fandom. It was like, oh, this is something I can avoid. It's like I don't have to deal with that over there. But as time kept passing, it basically just became closer. It came closer and closer to everyone's doorstep, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got to the point where it was just like it couldn't be ignored. And I think kind of for everyone, it's reaching that point where they're just kind of like, oh, this is everywhere and I can't avoid it. It kind of permeates a little bit of everything. And That's like the real major issue there. And so I was around, actually, like in 2020 is when I kind of started writing some stuff up, and I was actually going to apply for grad school. But yeah, we all know what happened that year. So I just decided, I was like, everything was too much in the air. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just dive into this. Consulted one of my professors from my previous college and just kind of got some advice and went from there.
Yeah, you've published, you've presented papers on this. I mean, this is a bit more than just a hobby for you.
Yeah. um, yeah, it got to that point where I was like, you're familiar with Lord of the Rings?
Of course.
Yeah. when when they're in the forest and he's like, there won't be a Shire Pippin. It was like it was like you couldn't leave it alone because it's just gonna keep becoming more and more self-destructive. So it was like there was no way to kind of just leave it because it was everywhere and everything. And it was just getting to be too much. So it's just like, all right, I really want to deconstruct why this is happening, where the breakdown in communications are occurring, and how we can address those.
So, one of the things that kind of got you and I talking with one another, in recent years, I have become kind of interested, uh, not just personally, but I suppose academically, journalistically, in again to use your term, extreme fandoms.
Mhm.
Both how they relate to fiction, which is a lot of the work that you do, but also how they relate to celebrity culture.
Mhm.
And I distinctly remember uh, because I'm also a writer, an author, and I write sort of investigative nonfiction work. And one of the topics that I was considering writing was about this extreme fandom, specifically in celebrity spaces, but kind of a broader 30,000 foot look at it all. And I was talking it over with a journalist friend of mine, and this person said, "You should not write about this topic." There's a reason why more books about this don't exist,
Oh god.
because you can't write about this phenomenon without mentioning certain celebrities and their fan bases and the way that these fan bases have like
Yeah,
aggressively
that makes
attempted to
sense.
ruin people's lives.
That makes
And
sense.
like it sounds like a joke, but there are people that like are legitimately terrified of certain celebrities and their fan bases and
Yeah.
certain, musical groups and all of that kind of thing. Um, and so I was just curious. I mean, like that I was warned, and I have been warned by multiple people. Do not write about this. Do not talk about this, because if this finds the wrong area of fan
Yeah.
culture, it could ruin your life like in a permanent and very real way. So I'm curious, how did you kind of get your start in studying
Mhm.
extreme fandom? Like, what were your inroads? And maybe we should define some terms up front for people who may not be as chronically online as
Mhm.
somebody like me. Like, what's a fandom? What makes it an extreme fandom? So let's start there. How'd you get into it? And let's start defining some terms.
Yeah. So for how I got into it, basically, kind of as I mentioned before, it made its way to my doorstep. And one of the big things that I'm interested in, just like, anime, Japanese culture, of course. And so it was kind of seeing some lost in translation, misinformation things happening where there was a lot of demonization going on. And it was just kind of like, well, I know this and I know this isn't correct. Um, but it was realizing how widespread a lot of misinformation was about specific Japanese terms and topics, specifically relating to like queer culture. And
Is this like what is a yaoi? What is a yuri? Like the that
yep,
kind of thing? Okay.
yep.
Sorry,
And
I was just trying to
no, it's
contextualize it
okay.
in my brain. Like, what kind of terms are we talking about? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it gets to that point where you're just like, how many hours do I have? So you're like trying to figure out summarize it, TLDR. Um, but yeah, basically that whole mess. And when I was looking into stuff, I found some people who were like, oh, here's this resource, here's this citation from this actual person who writes about this. And the responses they were getting were just extremely hostile. They're like, I don't care what it means. It means this negative interpretation that I applied to it to me. So I don't care what you have to say. I'm still going to hate these people. And just the level of vitriol and pure rage, honestly, that some people would have was just disturbing. And also, I saw how it was just kind of like muddying things I really loved. And like
Mm.
I grew up with, I made friends around, grew up with, and just seeing how it was becoming this kind of like, oh, if you like this, you shouldn't because it's morally reprehensible and it's bad for everyone, you know. And so that's kind of how I got my start there. But I eventually just started following academics, looking up as much of their research as I could, expanding my network, and just trying to absorb as much cited information as I could because the real issue here is a breakdown in cited sources versus emotional, non scientific based sources.
And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to somebody that does this research
Mhm.
formally, because once you kind of start looking into this, it is difficult to find people that write about it
Yeah,
from a
that's one
fact-based
reason I started
perspective. Yeah,
because
it's
it was just like there were a lot of people that had a lot to say and good points, but everything just kept devolving and it was such
mhm.
a violent and like hate-filled space, but nobody was taking it seriously basically. So, the most you might get is like a video essay on the topic, but anybody that you would see doing those like wasn't in the thick of it. They weren't on ground zero in the hell pit that was fandom in that regard. So,
So let's define that term for some people. So
yes.
what's a fandom? What is and
Mhm.
what makes it different from just people that like a thing?
Well, to start out, they're pretty broad. They're pretty broad terms. So, fandom can really be, you can have sports fandoms, you can have TV show fandoms, books, basically, anything that fans can gather around
Mhm.
could have a fandom, even if it's niche or small, you know, just a small group of diehard fans. So it's pretty broad in that respect. And when it comes to anti fandom, basically, I'll read a quote from one of the books that I referenced, um, where Jonathan Gray, who was kind of the pioneer for starting to write about anti fandom around like the early 2000s, he describes anti fans as those who strongly dislike a given text or genre, considering it inane, stupid, morally bankrupt, and/or aesthetic drivel. He also acknowledges that fans can become anti fans of a sort when an episode or part of a text is perceived as harming the text as a whole. But as his contribution to their collection discusses, anti fan practices are varied and take a number of different forms. So there can be crossover, and it can all kind of just depend on the specific individual.
So what does it mean to be an anti? I know that you said that
Mhm.
a lot of your focus specifically centers around the concept of shipping, which is
Yeah.
just when fans imagine a relationship between two or more fictional characters. Is that what I understand?
Yep, that's correct. And it's like anti-shippers have been around since at least the early 2000s. Um, and back then they were just known as anti-fans that were against specific fictional relationships or ships in media. And what I've found the biggest breakdown in the difference here is that anti-shippers will hate a ship, or certain like shipping aspects. But when it comes to antis, as we kind of call them now, it centers around hatred still for the ship, but its focus has largely shifted to hatred of the shippers themselves.
Hmm.
So instead of it sticking to the realm of, fiction and arguing over a specific text, you're getting into territory where, like, basically they will go after the other fans, as in like categorizing them as like criminal or corrupt or predatory based on what ships that they like in fiction, you know.
So is this anti-shipping specifically focusing on things that ships, relationships,
Mhm.
again, just feel like I need to keep stressing between fictional characters that do not exist.
Yes.
Um, are they upset that some people imagine types of relationships that they find morally reprehensible, like same-sex attraction or interspecies attraction, or
Mhm.
even like attraction with minors? Or is this just like, I don't like the fact that you imagine a world in which this consenting adult gets with this consenting adult, or something like is that like how
It's kind
is
of all of that, but the part that makes it all make sense is really just that this has kind of been a long time coming. And in the new article that I have that should be coming out sometime this spring, I deconstructed a lot there. But basically, there was a lot of conservative groups online in the early 2010s, specifically, between like 2013 to 2015. If you recall, 50 Shades of Grey.
Mm.
Mhm. That became a big point of contention in like radfem and like anti-porn like discussions in websites. Basically, you would see these people talk about how, 50 Shades is abuse. It doesn't matter if it's fiction, it's glorifying abuse. It is teaching women to, it's basically teaching women that um, it's okay to be with an abuser, you can fix him. It's basically harking back to the women need help because they're too naive to know any better,
Mm.
based on that type of literature, discourse. And
But is there a difference between critically engaging with a work? Like, I feel
Mhm.
like there are good faith criticisms, like just,
Yes.
bringing up 50 Shades. There are good faith criticisms
Mhm.
of the subject matter of 50 Shades, the way that
Mhm.
50 Shades was written, the way that 50 Shades entered the publishing world. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah,
good faith criticisms around
exactly.
the publishing process of that. But it
Mhm.
sounds like there is a difference between good faith criticism and whatever is happening in this anti-fandom space. Could we get into more of the meat of what is the difference between those things?
Yeah. Um, when it let's see, when it comes to like the anti-fandom space, you would see like some of those talking points from that would start to leak into fandom. So a lot of it would happen on Tumblr, for example.
Mm.
That's where a lot of it famously started, where people would be talking about stuff on blogs, and they would even run like undercover blogs or crypto blogs where they would deliberately disseminate um, their ideology and talking points about what is and isn't acceptable in fiction. or what they feel is harmful in fiction, harmful portrayals of like sexual content or topics. And they would say, oh, but make sure you don't mention this, or that, so people don't get scared and leave. Um, and so I think, like, going back to the, yaoi topic and BL, that's where a lot of breakdown occurred, because there was no, nobody knew the translations for anything. There's a huge language barrier. So anything they basically said was taken as the gospel truth and kind of became just like really warped and presented in a very bad faith way.
So how does a lot of this sounds like it started off as, I don't know about innocent, but
Mhm.
naive misunderstandings, mistranslations that are meeting
Mhm.
with emotional responses in a space that
Yeah.
rewards a lack of nuance. The internet is
Yeah.
not a place for nuance. It's not a place for meaty discussion. It's not usually a very good learning space for people that don't already know one another, for people of
Mhm.
outgroups. It's a great place for in groups. It's a terrible place for outgroups. Um, so how does this translate to what we see today, where music reviewers are having their lives and jobs threatened because they gave an 8 out of 10 to somebody like, Taylor Swift, and then suddenly the the fandom is literally ruining people's lives, going after people's kids, people's spouses, people's families, people's jobs. Like, how do we get from what's a yaoi
Mhm.
to there are celebrities that have cults that they can call upon to enact revenge against reviewers that they feel are slightly less than effusive with praise for their current work?
Um, my my specific expertise are mostly focusing on like the fictional realm, because I do know about those other ones. And but yeah, like you said yourself, I also avoid those. So I'm like, that's not my business. But I definitely think, to just briefly go over it, that there's an issue with, um everybody's extremely accessible these days.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, somebody who's writing a review, normally the only way you could get in contact with someone like 10, 15 years ago would be like writing to that paper, or writing, emailing the organization, or sending them an email, directly, kind of. There wasn't like, um, there wasn't like kind of livelihood set up where people have an account with their name, their face, their brand, you know, and it gets very personal in that way. And so the easy accessibility is definitely part of it, and also I think entitlement as
Mm.
well. Entitlement over media. You can even see that with people going after creators they like, for not doing or making something the exact way they want them to, even if they're a fan.
We've seen that, re-entering the fiction space. One of the first times that I really felt like I engaged with all sides, good, bad, and indifferent, of online extreme fandom was with the TV show Supernatural.
Yep.
That fan base, yikey do. Uh, those folks seemed to hate the show that they loved in a
Yeah.
way that I don't think I've seen before or since. Like they boy howdy, they go after the actors, they go after the writers, they go after I mean, just
Are are you familiar with Voltron?
the new one or the old
Yeah,
one? The new one,
Voltron
right?
Legendary Defender, yeah.
I'm familiar with that. I think I saw the first season,
It's
maybe the second
it's
or something.
it's on that was kind
It's
of
on Netflix.
the springboard for the fictional equivalent like that. It was as bad or worse than what I
Really?
saw with Supernatural.
So
Everybody kind of considers
your
it a cursed object.
your writing, I mean, your specific article is called "The Cult Structure of the American Anti." So clearly, there is. I mean, what cult's a pretty serious word to level at something, but
Yeah.
it's also hard not to think of that kind of social structure whenever you are in the thick of some of these conversations.
Hmm.
Is it fair to call some of these things a cult? What makes them a cult?
Hmm.
And how do you recognize kind of the symptoms that a fandom is getting that toxic?
Yeah. In that case specifically, it was kind of, as early on going over all the information, everything just kind of kept falling in line with the definition for cult, but just the basic definition could be a great devotion to a movement. Um, and in discussing like cultish behavior, um, one of the women who I reference in my text does discuss how there can be like constructive, kind of cults and like destructive. So you might think of a cult following for a sports team or something, or a band, versus when it becomes destructive. Um,
Oh, those are your constructive examples.
well, the
Oh, sorry. When
main
I
part,
think of a cult around a football team, I think it doesn't matter whether the Eagles win or lose. Philadelphia's burning. And
Philadelphia's burned to the
that
ground.
doesn't sound constructive, but maybe I'm a dummy. Maybe I don't know what
No,
I'm
you're
talking
not.
about.
it's it's like the issue there is like deliberately, is what you would call like deliberately um changing definitions and presenting information in a way where it makes you look better and other people look worse. So here's the quote I was looking for: cultishness is a spectrum capable of constructive or destructive outcomes. Destructive groups omit important information and distort their messages to make what they say more acceptable to members and outsiders. And so, like, in this case, what you'd see with antis was taking people's statements out of context, basing serious criminal accusations on fictional content, and omitting like scientifically cited evidence. Like they might say, "Oh, so and so is a predator," and you're like, "You don't know they're talking about an anime character," but they're presenting people that way, and so it fosters an environment of distrust and toxicity there.
How do you how do you go from so have you studied individual members, or is it just groups as a whole? Because I'm just curious how
Mhm.
you go from I love this TV show. I love Supernatural. It's fun.
Mhm.
It's a fun escape to the actor who plays this character must die because they were not enthusiastic enough about
Mhm.
me pretending that they are in a relationship with an angel in a trench coat or
Mhm.
something. Like how have you studied that slippery slope? Is it a slippery slope? Is there a specific mindset behind it? Are there warning signs? Like what goes into that? Where are we going there?
I think in cases like that, um, yeah, going back kind of like to the entitlement, like being not being able to separate the fiction, the series, with the people behind the series, like keeping the actors separate from the characters, and then saying like, well, this matters the most to me, and if I don't get my way, XYZ harassment. in regards to like.
So is there anything are I think I'm going to ask a stupid question because I've read a number of articles that tells me the answer is yes, but are studios aware of this? Are the celebrities themselves aware of this? Are
Mhm,
the creators of these TV shows aware of this? Are the band members aware of this?
mhm,
And if so, to your knowledge and your research, what is their response to these
mhm.
kinds of cults of personality? Are they doing anything about it? Do they welcome it? I've heard in some instances, some celebrities do welcome it because it creates a kind of shield against
Mhm,
bad reviews, against bad press or something like that, because they know that if there is an article written about them that is not glowing, that that person has a sort of Damocles over their head. So in your experience,
mhm.
what's the knowledge of the people behind the scenes on the
I
other end?
think,
It's not the fandom, but the actual
yeah,
creators of the media.
I think a decent amount are aware. Um, I'm personally most aware of the creators that have had encounters with Auntie specifically. So instead of like having a dedicated, um, what you call mobilized fan base,
Mm.
um, they experience sudden dogpiling and harassment that ultimately didn't go very far because the person was in a position of power. So I believe one of the writers on Voltron like commented on that, and um, a big issue that happened back in 2020 was Brian Fuller, the creator of Hannibal, was dogpiled by aunties because he expressed support for pro shippers, um, which are basically like the term has been misconstrued over and over, but originally it started out in opposition to aunties to be basically um, they don't conflate a person's morals with whatever fiction they make or consume. You know, you're not what you read or write,
Mhm.
and that they believe. Yeah, you can hate something, you can think it's disgusting, but you're not gonna harass people or send them threats because of it. Ultimately, but a lot of aunties have kind of labeled that to mean, oh, it means problematic shipper, and that means that you like shipping problematic things, which to them can vary because some view gore as acceptable, like gore and violence. They're like, oh, that's not problematic, that's art. And you're like, okay. And some people will find different, sexual content as non-problematic, while somebody else in their group will be like, that's disgusting, that's pro stripper behavior. And then they'll fight each other. So it becomes like this like tornado in effect.
Is there anything giving you hope in this space? Because it just sounds like, I mean, it sounds terrifying, and it sounds like it's only getting worse. And the longer the internet goes on the way the internet goes on, I mean,
Yeah.
like, are you watching
Like,
things like this potential Supreme Court
mhm,
hearing around section 230, where maybe social media platforms will have to start becoming responsible with the kinds of things that people post on it? Maybe they are going to be
mhm.
starting to consider a publisher, which is both horrible and also in this very specific instance maybe good. I
Yeah. Every time you see a new thing come out about like the courts and like the internet, you're like, oh, I don't know. But like personally, I am hopeful, but that's just because I can be a naturally optimistic person because it's all I got. But honestly though, in the work that I have been doing, I have gotten many messages from people thanking me or saying that I helped them or saying that they were in a dark place and they felt overwhelmed by this, but just seeing somebody bring attention to it, um, is helpful to them. And there's also people I've also seen a lot of people who have changed their minds, if they were just given some resources. They're like, wow, you know what? Like, I was wrong about this or that, and I can see how this was harmful to people before, because I think a lot of people genuinely do want to do the right thing, and they want to be good people, and they want to keep people safe. It's just that the way they got into that and the way they understand, kind of like online echo chamber versus
Mhm.
like a college, like educated course on a topic, has left a lot to be desired in terms of actual facts. So, but there are people out there who, don't want to cause harm, even if they don't realize that they're doing it because they think they're on the good side, I suppose. Um, and
You've
like,
talked about dogpiling before. I
mhm.
mean, I've certainly been on the other end of one of those dog piles, or on the receiving end of one of those a few times. I mean, I've been on the internet a long time, and I'm somebody that puts myself out there, so you get those from time to
Yeah.
time. Um, is there something that people can do to protect
Mhm.
themselves? I mean,
Mhm.
you'll see somebody share something just innocuous, something that you think
Yeah.
that on I mean on I keep thinking of the infamous chili neighbor from last year, and
Yeah.
I really liked this description, and I can't remember who talked about it. It was a comic artist, and I will hopefully find it and put their name in the notes, but if I don't find it, I'm so sorry. If you know it, somebody please tweet it out so that I can retweet you. But there was somebody who was talking about the fact that on the internet everything is flat,
Mhm.
everything is in two dimensions.
Yes.
So when there's outrage about something, it is hard to gauge the depth or the
Mhm.
heights of the outrage. So at times it can feel like anything that sparks major social media outrage that lasts for days, weeks, sometimes months, it, no matter what it is all equally an example of what is wrong with the world. It is all equally bad,
Mhm.
which means that sometimes you're putting a person who gave chili to their neighbor on the same level as like genocide in Ukraine.
Yes. That is
And
a problem.
everything feels flat. Everything
Mhm.
feels like it has the same importance. And one of the things, psychologists will tell you is that the brain really loves repetition,
Mhm.
really loves it. If we hear the same kinds of things over and over again, we will
Mhm.
accept similar statements as truth more readily than statements to the contrary,
Mhm.
even if those statements are false. If you heard over and over and over again, the sky is actually red.
Mhm.
No, this guy's actually red. And if that just became a trend and it lasted for weeks or months, there are then people who would start saying, I think this guy is I think this guy might be red. I'm not
Is it
sure, but
red?
I think this guy might be red.
Oh my
But
god.
that's the thing, is that there's this weird phenomenon where our brains kind of crave things that are similar. It's a
Mhm.
survival
That
thing.
well, that's exactly kind of what's happening here, People keep one of the issues is people keep repeating and associating, legal criminal terms with fiction,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of talk about, oh, this is watering down very severe claims and severe like traumas related to people by applying them to fictional characters, because there are examples, like I have an archive full of this stuff that is used along with the paper, but one of the examples is that someone said is you should treat fictional characters like you would treat someone in real life. And like, just to get into one of them that had me like Pepe Sylvie a little while ago was, are you familiar with Cookie Kingdom?
No, no, I am not.
Basically, it's
Am I
like a
wait, am I glad I'm not familiar or am I missing out on something cool? What's a cookie kingdom?
no, it's a game basically. Well, you could kind of compare it to like Candy Crush. Age range interest from like 8 years old to like probably like 15 to 20. It's just kind of
Hmm.
like a little game with gingerbread people,
Okay.
and you're
Yeah,
like
it's cute. It's like one of the it looks like every other game that your kid would accidentally run up a giant credit card bill on.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
And so, like, and one of there's and there are accounts that are dedicated kind of to like anti-shipping or like antis in this specific sense. And like just for an example, like one of the accounts, because a lot of them think of themselves as like predator hunters. They're exposing dangerous people, so the community can be safer because they associate the fiction with the person. But some of these accounts, like this one, in an effort to get exploitation material, children, taken down, some of them will actually share the names of accounts that could have photos of real children in like distribute them in an effort to get them reported. And some of the people running these accounts could be teenagers. And it's like, first of all, that's not your job. Second of all, it's extremely dangerous to willfully interact with people that you apparently think are predators, and also illegal as you could be it could be
Wait,
distribution of
wait, so
material.
how did a game about cookies? Wait, what?
Well,
I'm
like,
there is a piece I'm missing here.
there's a piece. Well, this account posted that, and they're like, okay, this is really important, everyone, please report this account. And then like another post on the account was about Cookie Run, and it was like, I'm sick and tired of the argument that they are just cookies when they are clearly more than that. If they were just cookies, I'm pretty sure there wouldn't be antagonists and protagonists trying to stop the antagonist. The cookies have family, they're race coded, they have ages and look like children. They don't look like children, they look like gingerbread cookies. They
What?
have morals and personal values and personalities. And like they're arguing like the morality of shipping cookies in this children's game with real life exploitation materials because the cookies have lives in the fictional world that they're in. Hmm? And it's
No.
just like it's like
No. Really?
the whiplash of an account, first of all poorly, addressing like actual exploitation, and in a way that like you'd have to report it, and I did because I was like, this shouldn't be online, with the same account going, they're
Oh
cookies that
no.
fight for their personal values. They have different personalities. I'm pretty sure if they can form a society, they are more than just cookies.
Oh
That's
my
a
God.
quote from the page.
These tweets are bad. Oh
This is on
no.
Instagram,
This is on Twitter from December. Oh my goodness.
but I'm just,
How do we
it's,
get there in cookies?
I know, Pepe Sylvie.
I I mean,
I'm just,
listen, like I don't want to take away from the fact that
yeah,
implicit bias exists, right?
yes.
Implicit bias exists. And implicit bias exists in writing a book, in game
Hmm.
development, in whatever the thing is. Implicit bias exists. Why? Because it's implicit, right? So people
Yeah.
inherently tend to inject problematic, deeply held ideals that they may not even realize that they're injecting into narratives, into game storylines, into animated films, into
Mhm.
TV shows, into whatever. So I don't want to take away from the fact that implicit bias exists, and it is
Yes.
important that we have good faith discussions of it when we see it presented, and the
Mhm.
ways in which we could make that better. But this seems to be different than good faith criticism, because if you're
Yeah.
saying, oh, you clearly support colorism if you play this game,
Mhm.
that feels like a very bad faith leap to make.
Yeah, and, I provided that example because,
Wow,
a lot of
that's
people don't realize how deep it goes to be the argument of fiction equals reality. The proof some people need for that is just, "Well, why do I cry at movies?" Gotcha. And you're like, "No, but did the movie change your entire personality or moral compass from watching it?" You know? Um, and,
I
where they equate, gingerbread cookies on
I'm
the
never
same
gonna eat a
level.
cookie again. I'm never ever gonna eat a cookie again. Just never.
Well, equating these gingerbread cookies that they believe have a society, not like somebody made up the society, like the creator, but the cookies have a society, and they put that on the same level as, living, breathing children.
That is intense. That
It
is
is, it
that is
is,
a
and that's why
desperate
it can
need to touch
become
grass. That is
it can become
so
so hard to articulate all of this because it's so deep that it's you know
well, but that's what we were talking about, how it all just
yeah.
kind of feels flat, and how outrage just it's all the same kind of
Yeah,
outrage.
exactly. It's you go from the cookies to real children, and they're the same now. They
Can we
become the
talk
same.
about, so you touched on something that I've seen everywhere, and
Mhm,
it's pervading politics right now. It's pervading all areas of social discourse. This
mhm.
kind of like, I must personally save all the children
Yes.
thing. And then people act in a way that doesn't feel safe to kids.
Yeah, or
Um
themselves, because
or themselves or other people.
a
Like,
lot
they're
of the
not
ones
acting like the superhero that they seem to be claiming
yeah.
to be. But do you, I mean, you're studying this cult mentality. Do you know where this comes from? Is this
Mhm.
what is this? Where is this going? How,
Yeah.
what is this?
Well, to start, since it is a big question, but
Yeah.
I wanna be, as specific as possible. I think, one of the things that it really has to do with is it's a combination of things. So, there are people who actually don't want to help kids, then they kind of want to muddy the waters, when it comes to um watering down definitions, kind of like groomer, so you associate it specifically with certain shippers in this case, for example, but nobody on your side could ever be a groomer, you know what I mean? And so there's people like that who are actually dangerous to other people masquerading. There are people who genuinely want to keep themselves and other people safe, and they're trying to do the right thing, but because of how social media works, a lot of it has become a game. And so trying to one up people, when you look at it objectively, they're calling people like child predators, blah blah blah, over fiction. But then people are like, why are you interacting with people you literally think are, predators? You should not be engaging with anyone, that you deem to be unsafe. And even in cases as well, they will, because they're trying to be a person who's infiltrating the bad guys and vigilante, expose expose the creeps. They will, they might lie about their age. They might worm their way into a Discord or someone's private, not safe for work account, 18 plus account, pretending to be someone else. And then when they find the artwork or whatever that was already in a private space, they will then publicly share it often poorly censored, thereby exposing other minors and themselves, if they're also a minor, to the content that wouldn't have been seen anyways because it was behind, it was locked behind a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, they think they're warning people, oh, stay away from this person who draws these characters this way. They're a creep, when they equate that same artwork on the level of like exploitation material of children. The characters might be minors in the anime or the show, whatever, or high schoolers, and they still, redistribute it. That kind of cognitive dissonance of being, I'm a hero. Let me expose everyone to this material that I personally think should be illegal because I'm saving the children. Does that make sense?
It
And
does.
like,
And
and what
I wish we'd quit using kids
yeah,
of all kinds
yeah,
as a football in a
hmm,
game that nobody signed up to play, because they don't need you saving them. They're
yeah. That's a
probably
good way to
fine.
put it.
They're probably fine. I mean, obviously, I see this a lot with discussions
Hmm.
of trans and queer youth.
Yeah.
It's a big topic. We're trying to save all the kids
Hmm.
right now from, I don't know, safe homes and loving educational environments where they feel supported and cared for, and psychologically and medically supported in ways that are affirming. For some strange reason, that's a terrible thing for people.
Yeah.
Uh, but what's so interesting is that the most dangerous person tends to be the person that thinks that they're right.
Yeah.
And nothing tells an extremist that they're right more than blaming their violence on children. Um,
Hmm.
I'm doing this to you because I'm trying to save children from you. That's why I must
Yeah. And
ruin you.
that's what makes it so dangerous,
Mhm.
you know. And like in the piece that I wrote, um, I cover some of that because I use Robert Sternberg's theories of hate,
Mhm.
which kind of breaks down how specific hate narratives can foster division and then thereby justify the mistreatment of other people. And so, like in this case, a lot of you see the narrative of the impure other and moral bankruptcy, where basically whatever the perceived enemy is embodies sin, and they're trying to spread their impure beliefs, which will thus threaten the moral fabric of society. And because of this, they're then seen as considered worthy of eradication to maintain the moral sanctity of whatever the community is. And it could be a small one or, large, in this case global, what we see happening with, LGBTQ, attacks on LGBTQ rights, for example. And so,
Has
yeah.
your research looked at just the unhealthy attachment that people have with fictional characters, generally
Hmm.
speaking? How
Hmm.
people overly identify with a fictional character to the point where they
Yeah.
they can't
They personally feel that they are that character.
they might feel they are that character, or the gosh, I just keep thinking of Supernatural just because this is the one with
Mhm.
the largest quantity of examples that I can think of. I think
That's
because
fine.
maybe it lasted for so many years
Mhm.
during my 20s when, like, that was very formative for me. Not Supernatural, just kind of watching that all play out was kind of
Yeah.
formative of my early understanding of fandom culture on the internet. But where people are just like, I have to call off work because so and so died, or
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I cannot even critically engage with other people online who have any opinion whatsoever about the show that is not my exact same opinion,
Mhm.
because this is so deeply personal for me. And it's not even like the fandom thing, just like individually
Mhm.
drilling down to, how do you get to that level of emotional attachment to a fictional character. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I've written them.
Hmm.
I write books, and I feel like I love my characters, but even I am not that attached to, like, if there ever comes a
Yeah.
day when someone's like, I'm gonna fight someone over the representation of this character, I'm like, baby doll, it wasn't that deep when I wrote it, so it should not be that deep for you now. Like,
You hold out a hand, you're like, please
please, please
calm
don't.
down.
But have you looked at how that drills down? Like, where does that come from? Like, what is that kind of
I
attachment?
haven't I haven't looked into that too much. Because I don't look that much at, like how someone gets from point A to point B in terms of their relationship with the character.
Less psychology, the makeup
Yeah,
of one person, and more
like 'cause
sociology, the culture of the group.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I'll look at more of like how people can justify their actions or behaviors towards other people. But I'm not the best person to talk about, um, yeah, like how an individual might become so enamored or infatuated with the character that they either think of themselves as that character, or they, like you said, they're like, I can't go into work, or I will fist fight you in the Denny's parking lot. you know.
Yeah, I've seen it where it's just like, I like Jiminy Flibblejibet. And then somebody comes along and is like, how dare you like that character? That's a bad character to like. You are a bad person for liking
Jiminy
Jiminy
Flibble
Flibblejibet.
apologist.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't you know what Jiminy Flibblejibet did to
Wibble
Corey
wabble.
McSquarejaw? Yeah, and it's like, how Corey McSquarejaw is clearly the better character. I
Hmm.
must now fight you because of what Jiminy Flibblejibet did to Corey McSquarejaw in this fictional show that is not real. Um, I I like that. That's a mystery. So is what do you recommend if you see a dog pile
Hmm.
happening? Do
Hmm.
you think you should? I mean, if something were happening in real life, if somebody were getting physically piled on,
Yeah.
you might intervene. You might call the police. You might
Hmm.
something like that. Those those social safety nets don't exist on the internet, at least
Hmm.
not, I mean, and especially
Yeah.
as
Not an immediate.
social media has changed. I mean, Twitter's a horrible place for it, and it's only gotten
Hmm.
worse under its new management. But Facebook comment sections have long been, and YouTube comment sections especially, have long been like legendary places where discourse goes to die. So
Hmm.
like, when you see this happening, if it's happening to you, what do you
Hmm.
recommend somebody do? And if it's happening to somebody else, what do you recommend that people do, as onlookers?
Yeah, I think that's what can make it so scary is that, you never know when somebody might find like an old post
Oh my
or
gosh,
just
people go
decide that,
dig. People go
yeah,
dig.
and they'll be like, I found this post from 5 years ago, and they're like, and I'm the one with
10
the
years ago,
problem.
15 years
Yeah,
ago. My
10 and 15
goodness.
years ago. But I think the yeah, because you can't really predict it or you know what people will do. I think the best thing to do would be to have a type of support system if you can. Even just in general, like following groups or being part of a Discord that you know is generally a supportive place, a place that you feel safe, or welcomed. Just so you don't feel that isolation. Because the biggest thing people try to do is cut people off, and make them feel worthless or like there's no other option but to delete their account or worse, self harm.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and so I think when it comes to the individual, make sure that you're surrounded by kind people and also, document. Even if it might be very stressful, document. What people say. If you have to, you can always put together like a document that just debunks, what people are saying. Because sometimes, a lot of people just make something up, as we talked about, misconstruing, misrepresenting other quotes or tweets examples, and then all of a sudden saying, oh, this person's racist, this person is a predator, this person believes this, that, and like when it wasn't the case at all, when you see the original context, and then people can say, oh, okay, and then they won't
But it's
also
astonishing how,
get in on that.
if enough people apply one of those labels,
Hmm. Yeah,
especially if it's harmful to kids,
it's really bad.
even if it's just roundly debunked, if enough
Yeah.
people believe it to be true, or if when I Google
Yeah.
you, that's what comes up first, not the debunked
Hmm.
stuff, but the bad stuff, the bad
Hmm.
accusations, that's enough to keep people out of jobs.
Yeah. And it's
Because
like,
so there are companies that don't want to hire you simply because
hmm
if it
the
gets out that
noise
you work
around
for
that.
them and somebody Googles them, it's like, why are you hiring a child predator? It's like, well, oh, well, this was
Hmm.
debunked and we side with that. And then it's a big corporation siding with a predator, an accused
Yeah,
predator. Like,
exactly.
and that's how this all gets spun. It's not a fact-based thing, it's an emotional thing. And
Hmm.
if you couch it in I'm protecting children, you get off scot-free with your bad behavior.
Yeah, and that's what makes it, so scary for people. Um, but when it comes to, if you see this happening to someone else, I think the most important thing to do is, of course, fact check, look into, like, I want to see the proof, the examples, show me the receipts, whatever. Um, when it comes to dogpiling, don't jump in on it. Always fact check. If it comes to, seeing someone that didn't do anything wrong being dogpiled, I think the most important thing is just to show up and support them in the thread where that's happening, as
Mhm.
well as, outside of that, possibly make a tweet, explain the situation, um, help people know that they're not alone, and make an effort to rectify that information. Because, yeah, I know um, one really popular large artist, um, they're still doing well for themselves, but they they just had like a huge hate mob, and it wasn't until like a bunch of accounts with thousands of followers kept posting, kept countering this, that people were like, "Oh, yeah, I didn't actually know anything about the person. I just saw that somebody called them this, and I assumed they were a bad person." Because a lot of those people don't even fact check. It's just exciting to
They
have a
just
new,
don't wanna be caught up in
yeah,
it.
it's new target kind of.
What are you watching these days?
Ooh.
What's your what fandoms are you in? Sam
Um,
Aburime.
um, well, actually, most recently, I've been getting back into Monster, Naoki Urasawa's Monster. Um,
Oh, I haven't consumed that piece of media.
it's really good.
I haven't.
It's the anime came out in 2004. It holds up really well. It looks very nice.
You know what's funny is that
It's on
actually came
Netflix
up in a
right now.
Google search because I was trying to tell somebody to watch Overlord, and I couldn't remember what it was called, and Monster came up, and so I think it's now in my queue somewhere.
Yeah, right now it's on Netflix. I've been telling people to watch it
Mhm.
just solely because I want them to relicense it in the US. It's kind of it's in licensing purgatory right now here. But like I just been
And
getting back in.
if people want to get more of your work, more of your
Mhm.
research, how can they do that?
You can find me on social media at, yeah, Sam Aburime on Twitter and Instagram. I also have a YouTube, but pretty much if you find me one place, I have links to all my socials in those other places. So it's pretty easy to find me.
You also sent along some resources if
Yeah.
people are interested in reading more fact-based
Hmm.
journalism, more fact-based research about this topic. I'll include those in the show notes. There aren't a lot of people writing about this, and from what I understand, they are not writing about this because they are kind of terrified of getting on the other end of these extreme fandom groups. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for being for writing
No
about this, for
problem.
researching this, and for being willing to speak with me today. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here. I'm so grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, it's really nice to be able to talk about it. It's such a huge topic that it's like you can never quite cover everything, you want to, but I hope that at least this kind of gave people like an idea of what's going on, even if it's just little portions of multiple parts of a whole.
That is going to do it here for this episode of Head on Fire. My thanks to my guest, Sam Aburime. More of the resources that Sam provided to learn more about this topic are going to be in the show notes, wherever it is that you're listening to this. If you like this show and you want to support it, there are a number of ways to help. Consider sharing it with your friends on social media. You could also like or rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and while you're there, leave a review. Reviews help recommend the show to other listeners like you. Literally, it could be a few emojis. The algorithm doesn't care. It just likes interaction. It likes comments. So 5 stars wherever you're listening to this currently. Take 5 seconds. Help a guy out. Thank you so much. If you hate the ads at the beginning and end of this show, consider joining my Patreon on a monthly basis. Patrons receive additional unedited audio and video content, as well as archived episodes, a private Discord server, and fun bonuses as I continue to write this book. You can sign up at patreon.com/headonfirepod. You could also, if you really feel like it, connect with me on social media. I am at Head on Fire Pod on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, for all the good that that's doing now. I've tried a couple of other things. I don't like any of the others so far. So far, we are doing TikTok, we are doing Instagram. We still have a Twitter. I do have a YouTube channel. If you like this show, if you want the video content, it is up on YouTube. So except for this interview, because there's really not much to put on YouTube because it's just my face. I don't know. Maybe we'll just put my face on there. You can just watch my face interview somebody. Maybe I'll still do that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. Thanks for tuning in and downloading the show. And remember, the best fandom to reach out and touch is grass. Be well.